in a kingdom built between mountains and clouds, where the rivers glowed with moonlight and the air smelled faintly of jasmine, there lived a young painter named Aaron Vale. He was not born of noble blood or wealth, but of imagination, and in a world ruled by crowns and swords. Imagination was often a dangerous gift. Aaron painted what others could not see. When he looked at the ocean, he painted not waves, but memories. When he looked at people, he didn't paint their faces, he painted their souls. And that, perhaps, is why his name began to spread far beyond the narrow alleys of his seaside town. Rumors whispered that his paintings could make stone cry and silence speak. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, a royal carriage appeared at his humble door. The royal messenger, cloaked in silver and white, dismounted and bowed slightly. "Aaron Vale," he said, "by command of Her Majesty, the Queen of Lissara, you are summoned to the palace at dawn. The princess requests her portrait." Aaron blinked in disbelief. Her portrait? But why me? The kingdom has dozens of court painters. The messenger's voice was calm but distant. The princess has refused them all. That night, Aaron could not sleep. He stood before his cracked window, staring at the moon, wondering what kind of princess would refuse every painter in the realm. He packed his brushes, pigments, and a single canvas he had saved for years, one he could never bring himself to use, because he always believed it was meant for someone special. The next morning, he followed the winding marble road that led to the palace of Lissara, a place so vast that clouds drifted between its towers. The guards let him in without question, as though they had been expecting him not for days, but for years. Inside, light spilled across golden halls and glass gardens where birds of blue fire sang. Every corner of the palace felt alive, yet strangely sad, like a melody trapped in a crystal cage. He was led to the Hall of Portraits, where the walls were lined with faces of kings and queens, eyes painted so perfectly they almost followed him. At the center of the hall stood the queen herself, tall and poised in white silk. "You are Aaron Vale," she said, her tone both gentle and sharp. "You have been chosen to paint my daughter, Princess Lara." Aaron bowed. "It would be my honor, Your Majesty." The queen studied him. "Understand this, my daughter has not left her chamber in over 2 years. She has refused to speak, to sing, or to smile. She hides behind curtains and shadows. We hope your art might reach where words cannot." Aaron hesitated. "Then I shall paint not what she shows me, but what she hides." The queen's eyes softened for just a heartbeat before she turned away. "You will begin tomorrow?" That night, Aaron was given a room overlooking the royal gardens. The moonlight poured across his blank canvas. He dipped his brush into water, though he had no paint yet, and whispered softly, "Show me her soul, and I will paint her heart." At sunrise, he entered the princess's chamber. It was vast, filled with silk drapes, books, and flowers that had long since wilted. In the far corner, behind a translucent curtain, sat the Princess Lara. He could not see her clearly, only the outline of her figure, like a dream wrapped in mist. The maid spoke softly. "Her Highness does not wish to be seen directly. You may paint her from where you stand." Aaron nodded. "As she wishes." He set up his easel, dipped his brush, and began. He painted not her face, but the light that fell around her, soft gold where she breathed, silver where her silence lingered. He noticed how even the air seemed to bend toward her, as if drawn by unseen gravity. Hours passed, yet she said nothing. Only the faint sound of pages turning and the rustle of her dress filled the air. When Aaron finally looked up, he whispered without meaning to, "You don't have to hide to be beautiful." For a moment, the air stilled, and behind the curtain, something shifted, the faintest sound of breath catching Dot, then silence again. That night, Aaron returned to his room, unable to sleep. He looked at the unfinished painting and realized something strange. Though he had never truly seen her face, he could already feel he knew her, not as a princess, but as a soul reaching out from behind glass. He didn't yet understand why, but something deep inside him had already changed. Morning light spilled softly into the princess's chamber, touching the silk curtains that separated her world from the rest of the palace. The air smelled faintly of lily and rain. Aaron arrived early, his paint box tucked under his arm. The guards nodded silently as he entered, as if they already knew his footsteps. He had painted many faces in his life, fishermen, mothers, soldiers, but never had he walked into a room that felt so full of quiet. Behind the curtain, Princess Lyra sat near the window, her figure outlined by sunlight. She was reading or pretending to. The soft flutter of pages was the only sound. Aaron cleared his throat gently. "Good morning, Your Highness." No answer. He smiled a little. "I hope the Lila haven't wilted again. The palace garden seemed to send me new ones every day." There was a pause, then a faint rustle. A voice, soft and uncertain, replied, "They send them for me, not for you." It was the first time he had heard her speak. Her tone wasn't cold, just careful, like someone who had forgotten how to use her voice. Aaron bowed, though she could not see it. "Then I am grateful for your kindness, Princess. The Lila keep me company while I paint." There was no reply, but the page in her book stilled. For a moment, he felt she was listening. As the days passed, the silence between them began to change. At first, it was heavy, the kind of silence that built walls. But soon, it became something else, a shared stillness, a quiet understanding. Aaron painted patiently. He painted not her face, but the feeling of her presence. The warmth near the curtain, the soft motion of her hand turning a page, the light that always seemed to lean toward her. Sometimes he hummed while he worked, old songs from his village, simple tunes that spoke of wind and water. And though Lyra never sang back, he sometimes thought he heard her humming softly when she thought he wasn't listening. One morning, the curtain shifted slightly. It wasn't much, just a faint ripple in the fabric, but enough for him to see a glimpse of her hand. It was pale, slender, and trembling slightly. Holding a paintbrush, she spoke suddenly, her voice clearer this time. "I used to paint too, before everything changed." Aaron froze. "Then perhaps you can teach me, Your Highness." Her voice carried a hint of a smile. "You're the painter. I doubt you need lessons from me." "Everyone does," Aaron said softly. "Even painters forget how to see sometimes." Silence followed, gentle and thoughtful. Then she asked quietly, "Do you always talk this much while painting?" He laughed, the first true laugh that had filled that room in years. "Only when I'm trying to make the silence less lonely." That afternoon, as the light grew golden, she asked, "What do you see when you look at me?" Aaron hesitated, his brush hovering over the canvas. "I see someone the world has silenced," he said finally. "But the silence doesn't belong to her. She's stronger than it." Behind the curtain, she was very still. Then, almost whispering, she said, "You speak as if you know me." Aaron's voice softened. "Perhaps I paint what I feel, not what I see." The next day, he found a small folded paper beside his easel. It wasn't sealed with a royal mark, just tied with a thread. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sketch. A quick pencil drawing of a man standing before a window, paintbrush in hand. The handwriting beneath it said, "You look lonelier than I do." Aaron smiled quietly. He tucked the paper into his coat pocket and whispered, "Then perhaps we are not so different after all." From that day onward, things began to change. The curtain no longer stayed perfectly closed. Sometimes it moved with the wind, or perhaps with her will, through its folds. He caught soft glimpses, a silver bracelet on her wrist, a loose strand of hair catching the light. the shape of her lips as she whispered to herself, and in return, Lyra began to ask him about the world outside, about rain on rooftops, about markets, about the sea. He told her everything he could remember: the taste of roasted chestnuts, the laughter of children chasing gulls, the scent of salt in the air. For each story he painted with words. Her silence grew a little lighter one evening. As the sun bled into the horizon, she asked, "Do you ever paint people you love?" Aaron hesitated. "I paint people I hope to love." There was a soft sound, perhaps a sigh, perhaps a laugh. Then she whispered, "Then paint me well." That night he could not sleep. He sat beside the half-finished portrait, a swirl of gold, blue, and shadow, and realized that her absence in the painting was the most beautiful part, because somehow she was already everywhere in it, and for the first time in his life. Aaron Vale, the painter who had always seen through others, found himself seen not by eyes, but by a heart hidden behind a curtain. The days in the palace began to blur together, not from boredom, but from beauty. Every morning, the same golden light spilled across the marble floor, the same hush of curtains, the same heartbeat of quiet conversation that lived between two people who had learned to listen beyond words. For the first time in years, Princess Lyra's laughter, faint and uncertain, echoed behind the curtain. Aaron didn't look up from his canvas when it happened. He only smiled and said, "I told you, Your Highness." The color blue never listens to rules. It always finds its own way. She laughed again, and this time it was louder, freer. It was a sound like sunlight breaking through clouds, but even as they grew closer, a secret tension filled the room, a tension made not of fear, but of longing. Aaron had painted nearly the entire portrait, the flowing gown, the window light, the shimmer of morning on silk. All that remained was her face, the one thing he had not seen. The curtain still stood between them, and yet, when he looked at his unfinished work, he could almost imagine her features. He could feel them, delicate yet strong, framed by the same mystery that had haunted him since the day he arrived. That evening, as the sun sank low, the queen entered quietly. She studied the painting, her eyes filled with restrained hope. How much longer? She asked. Aaron hesitated. A face cannot be painted until it chooses to be seen. The queen sighed, weary. My daughter hides from the world because she believes she has lost her beauty. Years ago, an illness took the color from her skin and left scars upon her cheek. No mirror in this palace has reflected her face since, perhaps. Your art may give her courage again. Aaron bowed deeply. Then I will paint not what time has taken, but what her heart still holds. The next morning, Lyra was quiet again. He could sense the heaviness in her tone, the return of walls she had tried so hard to lower. Your Majesty, Aaron said softly from the other side of the curtain, may I ask a question? She hesitated. You may. When you were a child, he continued, did you ever paint the sky? Her voice trembled slightly. Yes, I used to paint clouds shaped like crowns. He smiled. And did the clouds ever stay where you wanted them to? She was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, no, they always drifted away. Perhaps that's their beauty, Aaron said. To be seen, they must be free. There was a long pause. Then, slowly, the curtain began to move, not by wind, not by accident. It parted gently, revealing a figure in pale blue. For a breathless moment, Aaron forgot how to speak. Princess Lyra stood before him, fragile and radiant, as if carved from light and sorrow. Her hair shimmered like silver wheat, her eyes deep as midnight lakes. And though a faint scar traced her cheek, it was softer than the light that touched it. He bowed his head, not out of duty, but reverence. Your Highness, he whispered, you've given the painting its heart? Lyra's gaze dropped shyly. You see me, and yet you don't look away. Aaron smiled gently. I see you because you are real. The world hides behind perfection, not behind truth. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she stepped closer to the easel. Her reflection glimmered faintly on the canvas, a ghost awaiting form. Is that me? She asked softly. It will be, he said. If you allow me to paint the silence that lives inside your eyes. She stood still as he painted. The brush moved like a prayer, capturing every subtle line. Every glimmer of grace she carried unknowingly dot at times she closed her eyes. And he could feel her trust, fragile but growing. He painted the way the light kissed her scar, not to hide it, but to honor it. He painted the softness of her lips, quiet yet strong. He painted her eyes last, not blue, not gray, but the deep color of storms waiting to break into rain. When he stepped back, hours later, the silence in the room felt alive. The painting on the canvas was not of a princess. It was of a woman who had lived through pain and still glowed like dawn after rain. Lyra's lips parted slightly. I don't look broken, she whispered. Because you never were, Aaron replied. You only forgot that scars are proof you've healed. The next day, the queen visited again. When she saw the portrait, her eyes filled with tears. My daughter, she whispered, the light has returned to your face. Lyra smiled faintly. It was always there, Mother. I just needed someone to remind me. The queen turned to Aaron. You have done more than any doctor or priest could. The kingdom will honor you richly. But Aaron shook his head. Your Majesty, I need no gold. Only to finish what was begun. The queen tilted her head. And what is that? He looked at Lyra. To paint a smile that belongs to both of us. That night, Lyra could not sleep. She stood before the portrait, lit only by candlelight. The painting seemed to breathe, alive, radiant, and full of emotion she had long forgotten. She reached out to touch it, her fingers trembling. You gave me back my reflection, she whispered. From across the room, Aaron's quiet voice answered, No, princess. You gave it to yourself? In that stillness, something unspoken bloomed between them. Not a promise, not a confession, but the beginning of a love that needed no words. A love painted in silence. The portrait was unveiled beneath a soft silver dawn. Servants gasped quietly. Courtiers bowed low, and the queen wept, not out of sorrow, but of rediscovery. For there, upon the canvas, stood not a princess hidden by fear, but a woman reborn by courage. Yet while the kingdom celebrated, the painter and the princess found themselves caught in the quiet storm that followed glory, the kind of silence that hums beneath every miracle. That evening, Lyra wandered through the palace garden, a maze of marble fountains and moonlit roses. It was said the garden had once been a gift from her mother, built to mirror the heavens, but time had changed it. Many of the mirrors were cracked now, their silvered faces dulled by moss and dust. Aaron found her there, standing before one of them. Her reflection flickered like a ghost, half real, half forgotten. Strange, she murmured. The people who love us most often show us our beauty, while the mirrors only remind us of our flaws. Aaron stepped closer. Then stop asking the mirror for truth. It only knows what it sees, not what you are. Lyra turned, her eyes soft. And what do you see, Aaron? He paused. The woman the world will never deserve? For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them shimmered with the fragile glow of something forbidden, the kind of connection no law could name. Yet every heart could feel. Lyra turned away, breaking the spell. You must not speak so. If the court heard such words, they would call it treason, Aaron finished. But truth often sounds like treason to those who fear it. She looked at him sharply, then softened again. You're a bold painter? He smiled faintly. Only when beauty demands honesty. They walked among the roses, their steps slow. As if each petal carried a secret, Erin noticed how she brushed her fingers against the leaves, careful not to disturb the thorns. "You've seen pain before," he said quietly. She nodded. "Pain taught me to be gentle. Only those who have blood know how precious softness is." He watched her with quiet awe. "You speak like someone who's lived many lives." Lyra smiled sadly. "Perhaps I have. The first life ended the day I hid behind that curtain." They came upon the fountain of reflection, a pool so still it seemed like glass. Around it, hundreds of small mirrors were embedded in stone columns, angled to catch the moonlight. Lyra stood at its edge. "This was my mother's favorite place," she said. "It was built so the soul could see itself from every side." Erin gazed into the mirrored water. Dozens of reflections shimmered. Lyra's face multiplied 100-fold, each with a slightly different light, a different emotion. "Do you ever wonder," he asked softly, "which reflection is truly you?" She smiled faintly. "The one that looks back when you're not afraid to see it." A wind moved through the garden, scattering petals into the air. The moon slipped behind clouds, and for a moment, the mirrors reflected only darkness. Then Lyra spoke again, quieter than before. "When you painted me, Erin, I felt seen for the first time. But now I'm afraid of being seen too much." He frowned gently. "Why?" "Because the court whispers. They say you've enchanted me, that your brush has bound me to you." Erin looked away. "And do you believe them?" She hesitated. "No, but I fear I want to." Her voice trembled. "Every time you speak, the world becomes softer. Every time you look at me, I forget that I'm supposed to be a princess." The night deepened. The air between them thickened with something both sacred and dangerous. Erin stepped closer, but his voice was steady. "Your Highness, I am but a painter. My world is made of colors, not crowns." Lyra's eyes glistened. "And yet you've given me a kingdom I never knew existed, the kingdom of being seen." He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The mirrors caught their reflections, hundreds of images surrounding them, two figures standing close enough for their souls to touch, but they didn't. They only stood in silence, their hearts speaking the words their tongues dared not say. The next morning, the palace began to stir with rumor. Whispers slithered through corridors, of late-night walks, of stolen glances, of a forbidden bond between a royal and her artist. When Erin entered the great hall to continue his work, the courtiers' stares felt heavier than stone. Lyra noticed it too. "They will twist every silence into a scandal," she whispered. "Let them," he replied quietly. "A lie repeated 1,000 times cannot kill a truth felt once." But her face was shadowed by worry. "You do not understand the power they hold. My mother's kindness cannot protect us forever." Then Erin said, "I will finish your portrait and leave before their words reach her throne." Her heart clenched. "Leave?" He nodded. "Better they think me a dream than a danger." That evening, Lyra returned to the Garden of Mirrors alone. The moonlight fell cold across the fountain, and for the first time she saw her reflection clearly. Not multiplied, not distorted, just her as she was. Tears touched her eyes. "Why must beauty always come with sorrow?" She whispered to the water. A voice behind her answered, quiet but resolute. "Because beauty is born from those who have suffered enough to recognize it." Erin stood in the shadows, his travel cloak draped over one arm. "You weren't supposed to come," she said, "and yet I couldn't leave without saying goodbye." They faced each other, the mirrors surrounding them like silent witnesses. Lyra stepped forward. "If you go, the world will forget this, forget me." Erin shook his head. "No, the world will see your portrait and know your strength. They will know the truth of you, even if they never learn my name." Her lips trembled. "And what of me? What do I do with a heart that beats for someone it cannot have?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that holds both love and surrender. Then keep it alive. Let it paint your days brighter than I ever could. He turned to go, but she caught his hand. For a breathless second, they stood frozen, her hand trembling in his. Will you ever paint again? She asked. Always, he said. Because you taught me that even silence has color. As he walked away, the mirrors flickered, each one catching a glimpse of their parting. And in every reflection, Lyra remained, not hidden, not afraid, but radiant. The garden whispered around her, as if the wind itself carried his name, and somewhere in that silence, love lived, untamed, unspoken, and eternal. Dawn came quietly, too quietly for a palace that once hummed with songs of triumph. By the time the first light touched the spires, the rumor had already reached the queen. A painter had dared to love her daughter. A servant had forgotten his place. A masterpiece had turned into a scandal. The queen's hands trembled as she held the letter. It was unsigned, but poison never needed a name. Aaron was summoned to the throne room at noon. The air was heavy with judgment, the floor echoing beneath his slow, steady steps. Lyra stood beside her mother, pale as glass, her eyes pleading though her lips could not speak. The queen's voice was calm, too calm. Aaron of the northern province, she said, you have served this kingdom with unmatched skill. But whispers now threaten the peace of this court. Tell me, have you crossed the line that separates devotion from desire? Aaron met her gaze without flinching. Your Majesty, I have crossed no line but truth. I painted what I saw, and what I saw was courage, not scandal. Courage? The queen repeated, her voice trembling. They say you have bewitched her. I only showed her the face she hid from herself, he said quietly. If that is witchcraft, then perhaps your palace needs more magic. A murmur rippled through the court, half awe, half outrage. The queen's jaw tightened. You speak boldly for a man about to lose everything. I already have, Aaron said, glancing briefly at Lyra, her eyes filled with tears. Mother, please. But the queen raised her hand. Enough. Her voice broke slightly as she spoke the words that would change their fates forever. You are hereby banished from the royal city. Your paintings will remain, but your name will not. You will never again stand before this court. The hall fell silent. Aaron bowed low. If exile is the price for truth, then I will carry it with honor. He turned to leave, but Lyra stepped forward, breaking every rule of the court. She grasped his sleeve. No, she whispered. Don't let them erase you. Hal looked at her, not as a princess, but as a soul bound to his. I can endure being forgotten, he said softly, as long as you remember. Guards moved between them, their armor clattering like thunder. As they pulled him away, Lyra's voice rang out, desperate and trembling. Aaron, what will I do without you? He smiled faintly. Then keep living beautifully. That is how you'll find me again. That night, the queen found her daughter weeping before the painting. My child, she said, her voice breaking, you must understand. A queen's mercy cannot shield love from consequence. Lyra lifted her head, eyes fierce through her tears. Then perhaps a crown should not weigh more than a heart. The queen stared at her, and for the first time, saw the woman her daughter had become. Far from the palace walls, Aaron walked alone through the misted woods. Carrying nothing but his brushes and a small satchel, he passed the river where the kingdom's banners once shimmered in reflection. He passed villages that whispered his name in secret. To some, he was a traitor. To others, a prophet of beauty-defying power. Everywhere he went, he painted not for coin, not for praise, but for memory. On stone walls, he painted faces that had been silenced. On market stalls, he painted stars that shone above the poor. On ruined gates, he painted eyes that saw truth, even when blindfolded by fear. And sometimes, when the wind was gentle, He painted her, always her. Months passed. The world changed Dot in the royal city. Whispers became stories, and stories became songs. Children spoke of a painter who could capture souls. Women told of a princess whose portrait made even kings weep. The queen tried to silence them, but art, once born, cannot be unpainted. Lyra, confined to her chambers, would sneak into the old gallery at night. She would light a single candle and stand before her portrait, the one Aaron had left behind. Every brushstroke carried his presence. Every color whispered his name, and one night she discovered something hidden, a small inscription, written in gold beneath the frame. It read, "To the one who taught me that silence has a voice." A. Her tears fell softly on the canvas, glimmering like dew. Years drifted by like forgotten dreams. Aaron's name faded from the records, but his art spread across distant lands. Travelers spoke of murals appearing overnight, scenes of light emerging from darkness, faces looking skyward, hands reaching for hope. They called him the silent painter. No one knew where he lived, or if he lived at all. But one legend endured, that every spring when the moon was full, a mysterious painting would appear in a different village, a woman in blue, standing by a mirror, her eyes filled with longing and light. In the palace, Lyra grew into a queen. Her rule was gentle, her wisdom deep. She reopened the garden of mirrors, letting the people walk freely among them. She told them, "See yourselves not as the world tells you, but as you truly are." Her people loved her. Yet sometimes, when she stood alone by the fountain, she would whisper to the wind, "Aaron, if you still paint, let the stars be your canvas, and I will look for you there." Far away, in a small village near the northern cliffs, an old man painted beneath the twilight. His hands trembled with age, but his eyes still carried the fire of youth. A child watched him curiously. "What are you painting, sir?" The painter smiled. "A promise." When the boy peered closer, he saw a woman standing in a garden of mirrors, her reflection shining in 1,000 lights. And beneath the painting, the old man wrote one final line, "Every exile ends where love still remembers." The wind carried the scent of roses from far away, from a garden once hidden behind palace walls. And in that moment, the world felt small again, just a painter, a princess, and a love too true for time to erase. The kingdom had changed. Seasons had come and gone, kings had risen and fallen, but some stories refused to die. They lived quietly, whispered in markets, sung by children, remembered in the scent of paint and the glow of moonlight. One of those stories was about a princess who once loved a painter, and about a painting that had outlived them both. Lyra, now an older queen, ruled not with decrees, but with gentleness. Her hair, once black as ink, had turned silver like moonlight. Yet her eyes, those same deep, searching eyes, still carried the memory of that boy who had painted her heart into color. Every year, on the anniversary of his exile, she would walk alone to the garden of mirrors. The once broken glass now shimmered like lakes of light, reflecting the stars above. She would sit beside the central mirror and whisper his name, softly, as though afraid to disturb the silence he left behind. But one night, as the wind moved through the trees, something felt different. The air hummed, faintly, like the breath of a long-forgotten song. And then she saw it, on the far wall of the garden, where the moonlight touched the stone. A new mural had appeared. She rose, her heart trembling. No one had entered this garden in days. Yet there it was, a fresh painting, the paint still wet, the scent of oil and roses still lingering. It showed her, standing beneath the moon, surrounded by light. But this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood him, older, yes, but unmistakable. The same calm gaze, the same quiet strength, the same soul that once painted her in silence. And beneath it, in golden letters, A line was written, "When light returns, so will I." Lyra fell to her knees, tears filling her eyes. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice breaking. Could it be? Could he still live? That very night, she left the palace without an escort, just a cloak, a lantern, and hope burning brighter than reason. She followed the moonlit road northward, toward the cliffs where the sea whispered to the stars. For days she traveled, through forests, villages, and riversides, asking wherever she went, "Have you seen a painter?" An old man with silver hair and paint-stained hands. Some shook their heads. Others smiled softly. And one little girl, barefoot and bright-eyed, said, "Yes, he painted the sky on the church wall. He said he was waiting for his queen." At last, after a long journey, she reached a small coastal village, humble homes, wind-blown flowers, and the sound of waves crashing like heartbeats. She saw him there, sitting before an easel on a hill, facing the horizon. His hair was white, his hands fragile, but his brush still moved with grace. For a long moment, she could not speak. She only watched him, afraid that if she did, the dream would vanish. Done. Softly, she said, "You still paint the light." He turned. The brush slipped from his hand. For a heartbeat, time stopped. "Lyra." She smiled through her tears. "You remember my name." He laughed weakly, the sound trembling like wind in reeds. "I've been painting it for years." They walked toward each other, slowly, as though afraid the earth might crack beneath the weight of their reunion. When they finally met, he reached out a trembling hand and touched her cheek. "You kept your promise," he whispered, "and you," she said, "never stopped believing." They sat together by the sea for hours, talking not about what they had lost, but what they had found: faith, forgiveness, and a love that had never needed to be spoken aloud. Aaron told her how he had painted across villages, each wall a piece of their story. Lyra told him how she had ruled with the lessons he taught her, to see truth, not power. As the sun began to set, the horizon burned gold, casting its light across the waves. He turned to her. "I wanted to show you one last thing," he said. He lifted the cloth covering the canvas before him. It was a painting of them both, not as young lovers, but as they were now. Older, wiser, holding hands beneath a golden sky. Beneath it, he had written just 4 words: "The reunion of light." Lyra smiled. "It's beautiful." He looked at her, eyes shining. "So are you." That night, as the tide rose and the stars began to bloom across the heavens, Aaron fell asleep beside her. His brush still lay in his hand. When dawn came, he did not wake. But on his face was peace, the kind that only truth can grant. Lyra did not weep. She only sat beside him, watching the sunlight paint the sky in hues of gold and rose, colors she knew he had mixed from his heart. Then she whispered, "You've finished your masterpiece." Weeks later, when the queen returned to her palace, she carried his final painting with her. It was placed in the royal gallery, open for all to see, no guards, no ropes, no restrictions. Beneath it, on a small plaque, she had written, "He taught me that love is not the act of possessing, but the art of seeing one another clearly, even through silence, even through time." And every spring, when the first rays of sunlight entered the gallery, they would fall perfectly upon that painting, illuminating the faces of the painter and the princess, forever reunited in light. Years later, after Queen Lyra's passing, villagers would still speak of the 2 lovers who defied a kingdom. They said that sometimes, when the moon was high, the mural in the Garden of Mirrors shimmered faintly, showing not one reflection, but 2. And in that quiet glow, you could almost hear the whisper of a brushstroke and the soft voice of a painter saying, "Every exile ends where love still remembers."